Okay, for the coolant system, you have to put this upper reservoir here, and then there's the overflow tank here that this small line loops around and goes to the back of the overflow. Then the top of the overflow, you just send down to the pavement. So there is a, I don't know if you can see it, it's quite tight here. There is a glass level tube there that you can look at overflow level. So here you have your reservoir, your filler cap. I'm using 60-40, so 60% distilled, 40% Dex Cool, GM approved coolant for LS engines. This is the steam line that routes over to the steam ports on the front of the cylinders here. There's one here, and then that connects to this steam port here. So these LS3 cylinder heads release steam through this line here, which goes to the top of the filler reservoir. Your fluid goes down here into the Messier fitting that bolts on the block. Here's your water jacket that on the cool side, and then on the hot side, water comes out of the engine on this water jacket here, for which there's a gasket, and then goes into this hot coolant line that goes up to the radiator. So let's see, anything else for coolant lines back here? Not really. Showed you the overflow, the reservoir, the cap. Told you I use 60-40. Here's a shot of the Xerex Dex Cool that's approved by GM. It's a Valvoline product. So I'm using 40% of this. This is a concentrate that you need to mix with water. And I'm using 60% distilled and 40% concentrate here. Let me say that again. The 60% distilled and 40% coolant is cooler because there's more water, and you're right pretty much on the threshold of, you have to look at the temperature scales that you can reach. So this is Houston. It's very hot in the summer. You know, typical like Las Vegas, sitting at a red light, the tarmac gets about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. So you do have to watch it. I didn't want to go with 50-50 because it's a little bit, you can get a little bit more cooler if you went 55-45 or even 60-40. So you just have to watch. You can't have too much water or it'll steam up on you. So you have to be careful about that. So that's the Dex Cool, approved for GM uses here. And it doesn't you don't have to use Valvoline. There's also a Prestone that carries the Dex Cool label that GM approved. There is a GM AC Delco version of Dex Cool, which is an original, which a lot of LS forums say is the good sauce that you should get. It's higher quality and it has higher concentrations of yada, 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 so it's better. But if you think about it, GM is not in the business of making antifreezes and coolants. So they contract out to chemical manufacturers to crank out their Dex Cool. And in fact, I would probably guess that GM's Dex Cool with the AC Delco, the blue bottles, are probably manufactured by Prestone or Valvoline or some other manufacturer who's in the business of large-scale chemistry. GM's not in the business of making antifreeze and coolant, so they're going to contract out. So the statement that, oh, buy the AC Delco, it's better, it has stronger concentrates, and yada, 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 it's probably not true. Now I'm underneath the car on the driver's side of the engine cradle that holds the LS3 block. This is the large hot supply that comes out of the hot side of the engine, and that has a radiator loom on it, a silicone hose loom to protect it from being cut. It then forms into this larger, you can see it transitions into right here. Right here, it goes into an aluminum pipe And then I had to use a hose clamp here because it was one of the last things that I fastened. But as you then move up, then this is protectant here. These are all silicone protectants. These are the AC lines that I coated with silicone for heat protection and wear protection. But the hot line is in aluminum here. This is the heat. So it spans, it comes below the drive shaft. These are the AC lines and silicone heater hose. This aluminum pipe, 1 1/4, comes below the drive shaft. And I'm at full swoop right now with no wheel on the car is 2 feet in the air. And therefore this driver's side axle, this trailing arm is at full swoop. It's all the way down. The car's not down on its weight. So the drive shaft here on this side is all the way down this way, as much as it could be. So then when I lower the car and the weight, this will go up, and then there's going to be this will never come down because that's the transaxle right there, the CV joint, the 930 CV joint right here. So this is never going, this will only go up. It'll never go lower than this. So it's not going to hit this cooling line at all. The bellows here on the drive shaft isn't going to move at all. If anything, this is going to go up 1.5 inches or so. So because the angle, when the weight's on the axle, it's going to go raise like that. So then after I bring this aluminum pipe, this is the heat shrink Gates wrap that I used all over the car because it prevents, you don't have to use hose clamps anymore with this Gates heat shrink wrap for your hose connections. So I used a propane torch on this, and you just hold it about 6, 7, 8 inches away and move it pretty quickly. And then this shrinks really good. I've had a number of hot cold cycles that I ran with the engine on at idle and found no leakage whatsoever. So they're doing really well. This is an Adele clamp that fastens this 90-degree rubber elbow into the chassis. So you drill this out. That's an M5 screw. I use PR15 on everything that I drill. That's stainless steel, rubber encapsulated so it won't cut into the hose. Then it goes over outside here. So after you feed that aluminum 1 1/4 into that 90-degree rubber elbow, silicone elbow, you come out at 90 degrees to the edge of the car, and then just ride inside your crimp here, your crimp chassis, and then you use a 45 and try to stay up in this. And I have an Adele clamp there. This is a heat wrap here because you need a little bit of pipe to get from that. That's a 45, and this is another 45 blue silicone. Here's your Gates heat wrap. Then I go into aluminum pipe again, and then span below the rocker arm in aluminum pipe with an Adele clamp here, and then an Adele clamp up here. And then you can see you use a 45 to turn into where you're going to go into the radiator. Then once you make that 45 turn, you run another 45, use an Adele clamp here to keep the lines fastened in the chassis, and then another aluminum line here, 1 1/4, with your Gates shrink wrap on your rubber silicone fittings. And then for Forma 90, I had to go under the GT3 cross member. Now, some builds for LO swaps will send the aluminum coolant lines through the cross member, but I checked, and there's no way you want to drill through this aircraft aluminum cross member. You would really create a lot of stress issues on that and put that at risk, severe risk of fracture under stress of the car if you drill a 1.5 inch hole in this new GT3 suspension cross member here. So there was no way I was going to put this pipe through there. So I'm taking a little bit of risk. It's 1.25 inches down below, so it's lower than the car. So I'll just have to really be careful And if I rip this out and hit anything like a wooden box or a tire in the freeway that knocks this out, I'll just have to rebuild it. But after all, it's just coolant line. I can pull over and then have the car towed and then just repair it on my own. It's just coolant line. Even if this gets ripped, it's aluminum line and silicone hose. Nothing high tech about it. So you just have to replace what's there. Then I went to, after I made a 90-degree turn here, I went up into a pass-through bulkhead, an aluminum bulkhead pass-through fitting here, and then came out in the top. And you can see that here, I came out from the bulkhead here, then made a 90-degree turn, and then went this way, and then came down. This is a Y pipe that goes to the heater, and then this heater line, 5/8 heater hose, crawls back up the trunk behind the fuel tank, and then makes a turn over to the smuggler's box. So that's hot water that goes to the heater from a Y pipe here. Then this is still your hot water that now under the fuel tank here. By the way, the fuel tank looks like this. When you look up at the fuel tank, it looks like this. So it protrudes down here. Here's a fitting. And now continuing on with the hot side, then you come under your fuel. This is a fuel support that I welded together with aluminum angle. And then this is hot. It comes over, comes up into, this is pretty tight here, comes up into a thermostat for which hot water, this is blue that comes up this way. Hot water, when it's cool, it's going to come into this bypass. Then when it reaches 180 degrees F, it's going to go route this way and then go up into the radiator here. So that radiator input, or that inlet line, is at about a 45-degree angle. So now tracing the bypass of cooler water that's not yet 180 degrees, this is held down by, this is a C-clamp to join the two sides there. That's an Adele clamp, and here's an Adele clamp to hold this bypass route on this steel so it doesn't shatter or jump around. Then it comes over. Then there's a 45 fitting on it. Continuing on, there's a 45-degree coupler here. That goes into what's called the F block. It's a little bit tight here, but nevertheless, the F block takes the bypass cool water and comes into the F block here. Then this goes to the heater. It's cool, so coming out of the heater, it's going to be cool water, because you just pulled heat out of the hot water from the hot side. And then this is the cool side of the cooling system. And that line that feeds back there is the cool 1 1/4 silicone hose that attaches on the aluminum outlet of the radiator that has a 45-degree angle up. And now this is all the cool side. You're inputting the cool water from the heater into the F block, and then you have your thicker line here. This is the heater line, the cool, and then your thicker cool goes here, and then makes a 90. There's a 90 elbow here that comes down, joins into the aluminum underneath the GT3 cross member, and then makes a turn here underneath the car, and then goes out to this right rocker. So the right rocker carries the cool water back to the engine bay and then routes into the Messier electric fuel pump. And finally, on the cool side of the coolant system, you route your cool water back this way. Do the same thing with the 45 here. You run aluminum pipe under your rocker connected by Adele clamps. Then go over, there are Adele clamps here, your gates, heat shrinks, then a 90-degree silicone rubber joint coming into aluminum. Then you run the aluminum below the drive shaft, because this drive shaft can only go up now because it's at full swoop, because the car's sitting at 2 feet in the air. So that red drive shaft will not go lower, it will go higher when you lower the car in its weight. Then that aluminum cool side goes up. That's the engine cradle. You can see the blue silicone line there. And then that feeds into the Messier electric fuel pump, which is shown, could probably get a best shot of it here. Yeah, there it is. There's your Messier electric fuel pump. Here's your cool 1 1/4 silicone line going into the Messier fuel pump. You need to run your white Permatex high temperature sealer on this fitting. So pull that, because this will leak water all over the place if you don't seal that when you're installing this Messier electric fuel pump. So this is water in, and then on the top here is water. You can see the hose clamp for that right there. So there you go. That's your cool water that goes back up to the cool side of the engine block, and the filler cap. So there you have it, the complete cooling system.